what has been your involvement in Latvia thus far? Do you know anything about the Latvian economy?
Well, I was a research director and professor of economics at the Riga Graduate School of Law, right behind me. I've been lecturing at the Stockholm School of Economics for a number of years, and Jeff Summers and I have written a series of articles for Diana and other magazines in Latvia, warning them for the last 5 years that a real estate bubble was coming that was going to load them down with debt and cause problems of insolvency, a price collapse, and leave them with negative equity later. And what we wrote in the newspapers and what we taught the classes is exactly what happened.
So you would say that you knew all along that there was going to be a real estate bubble?
Not only that, but 3 years ago, I brought one of the leading real estate appraisers from the United States, teaching my students here how to make a land map of Latvia to prepare a group of students and specialists who could actually map the value of Latvian land as a first step in shifting the tax burden off labor and off industry onto land where it basically belongs, because it will not increase prices. We need a tax policy in Latvia that basically will lower prices, lower the cost of production, and let wages go further and make Latvia more competitive in the world economy.
When you talk about production, many people in Latvia, have simply felt that Latvia basically doesn't produce very much, that there's another path to prosperity. For instance, as a finance center or something like this, you're completely against that?
No, not at all. Finance has to get its money from the real economy. There's an economic surplus that's produced by industry and agriculture, and to some extent commerce, power production, transportation, but finance is extractive. Finance creates credit to lend to the real economy, and in exchange it withdraws interest. Now, right now, Latvians are having to repay their debts, and when they repay debt, this money they have is not available to buy goods and services. So ultimately, what they're having now in Latvia is debt deflation, and that is not good for the economy. So while finance can make money for Latvia, it makes money off the customers of finance. If the customers are outside of Latvia, then finance brings money into Latvia. But if Latvian's a customer for other banks outside, then money is drained out of Latvia.
You used the phrase real economy. What's the real economy?
The real economy is what people mean for the production of goods and services. Food, things that you buy, things that actually have a value. In classical economics, value is what has a cost of production. It's what's produced by labor and and machinery. If something is not produced by labor and machinery, you can get money out of buying a building and charging for it. You can take one of your highways and you can put a toll booth on it, and you can make everybody pay who uses the highway. You can put parking meters along your streets and you can charge people for parking, but that's not producing anything. That's siphoning off money from the economy. So there's a difference between, say, a parasite and a host. The host grows and produces nourishment to grow further, and the parasite takes the money out of this, and that's really the difference. Or it's wealth versus overhead. Wealth is what a country produces in goods and services. Overhead is what's taken off of this in the form of interest and rent.
We're currently in a terrible crisis. Wages are falling. People are burdened heavily with debt. People are emigrating. Well, do you think there's a possibility to change the direction?
Well, it's not really a crisis yet. A crisis is where trends intersect and something changes. Right now, Latvia is not to that position. Latvia is trying to pay its debts by running down savings accounts, by cutting back consumption, by becoming poorer and poorer. The crisis will come at the point where Latvians can't get any poorer than they are, when they begin to lose their houses, when they begin to forfeit them, and creditors take over. The crisis is what's happening in the United States and California and Florida and other countries. A crisis is when Latvians decide to do something, and that's where they have to make a choice. It hasn't come to making a choice yet because they're still trying to get by making the old choices that have led to the problems they're having now and to the poverty they're suffering now.
Are you
They're suffering. Suffering is not a crisis. Suffering is suffering.
When we spoke earlier, you made a comment that the entire trajectory was wrong. Would you care to comment on that now? I mean, are you saying that the approach that Latvia has taken for the last
what happened in 1991 was like genetic engineering. You come and you sort of change the genetic makeup of a animal or a plant, and you try to make it survive. Latvia had certain flaws that were guaranteed to make it die very quickly. One flaw, the idea is when you're creating an organism, you want it to survive efficiently. They created Latvia as the most inefficient possible economy. If you were trying to create an economy where everything went wrong and you had a crisis, Latvia was the way to do it. And for a number of reasons. Number one, they had probably the worst tax system in the world. No country in the world, no democracy in the world has ever had a flat tax. Before Latvians even begin to produce any goods and services, they're burdened. It's like they're carrying a huge burden on their back that no workers anywhere else in the world have to carry. So it's a handicap that a jockey would wear in a horse race. It's an extra burden they have with the tax. In America and the whole progressive era at the beginning of the 20th century, the ideal of taxes, nobody likes taxes, but the least bad tax is a kind of tax that does not add to price. And that kind of tax is a tax on what's called economic rent. It's a tax on the land value or monopoly super profits. If you would have had the tax falling on houses in real estate, then the rental value of real estate would have gone to pay the taxes that labor now pays. Workers would have had to pay a lot less. Homeowners would have had to pay a lot less. If you would have taxed real estate instead of labor, housing prices wouldn't have gone up. Housing prices would have remained stable, and they should have remained stable for Latvia. There's no reason that housing prices and rent prices today shouldn't be as low as they were in 1991. The reason that they've gone up is that the Latvian government has not done what other governments do and tax property, but they've left all of this property tax-free. So people are paying higher rents because they have enough money to afford higher rents, but the higher rents are all being paid to the bank. They're in the form of interest rates that are used to bid up property. A house or a building is worth whatever a bank will lend. And the more money that the tax collector gives up, the more revenue is available to be capitalized into a large loan by a bank to lend out. And so the banks have bid up the price of housing, and what is untaxed there, the government has had to make up this failure to tax real estate by going and taxing labor and making it uncompetitive. So at the same time the tax system puts workers out of work, it raises their cost of housing. So Latvians have to pay a very high income tax, and they have to pay a very high cost for housing. And you put these two, rent and interest and housing together, and there's such a high price before they even break even and buy their food, before they buy the car, before they buy the furniture, before they pay for clothing. They already have to pay such a high amount of money that no matter how little they're paid, they can't compete in world markets. So the tax system that was brought to Latvia was basically designed to prevent it from competing. It's as if Europe and the neoliberals and the advisors said, we want Latvia to be a market for our exports. We want Latvians to be a market for our banks. We don't want them to compete. We don't want Latvians to produce goods and services. We want to produce the goods and services to sell to the Latvians, and we want to make sure that they've crippled their economy, and we've designed a neoliberal tax plan that makes sure that they go through life crippled, and they'll always need us to enable them to live, and if they don't borrow from us, they'll die or they'll emigrate. That's the system that was put in, and sure enough, Latvians are emigrating because they can't have work here. They've let themselves be crippled by the European advisors. And the crisis will come when they decide that they don't want to be crippled, and when they decide to do what was originally promised, to have the same living standards that were in Europe, and to have a European-style social democracy, and have the kind of laws that you have in Europe and North America.
What would you say to people who say that it's simply not possible to swim against the stream in that way?
What stream are you talking about?
That in general, so many...
The whole world is going in this stream. Latvia has been going against the world stream for 18 years. Latvia is doing what has taken on a system that other countries don't have. Latvia is going against the stream. All of classical economics, Adam Smith, John Stuart Mill, Ricardo, the Progressive era, they were all going in the stream. Latvia is going back to the Middle Ages. Latvia is going back towards feudalism and debt peonage. That's going to be the result of the bankruptcy that its real estate is now in, that its debt is now in. Latvians are going to have to pay all of the economic surplus to pay the debts that they owe to the banks. That's going against the stream. No other country would let itself be treated this way.
Why has there been such a movement, for instance, however, away from earlier models of social democracy, for instance, in Denmark, or even even with labor in the United Kingdom? I mean, towards
because these models of social democracy had gone too far to the other extreme. The most successful economies in history have been mixed economies. If you have a bureaucratic state, centralized planning, that's not going to work because that's a huge overhead, and these models became corrupted and just overblown. But the reaction was to go to the other extreme and have a free market economy. Now, the free marketers, people who call themselves free marketers, really opposed the government and opposed government planning because government planning had become corrupt. Government planning throughout Europe and America had been taken over by the banks. But if you get rid of government planning, somebody's going to do forward planning. Every economy since the Stone Age has been planned. The question is, who's going to do it? And if the government doesn't do the planning, then the banks end up doing the planning. So in opposing government planning and dismantling the government, you've turned power to an even more centralized, even more inefficient, even more costly form, and that's the banks. And the neoliberals and the people who designed the Latvian economy had blinders. They didn't see that the banks would become the planners instead of the government. They had a fairy tale in their mind. They imagined that if you got rid of government planning, everybody as individuals would plan. But Latvian individuals have to plan within a context of an economy that's shaped by the banks. And the banks say, how much can we take from them? Banks don't really produce a product like the real economy. The product banks produce is debt, and they produced enough debt to absorb the entire disposable personal income of most Latvians. So what they make over and above eating and going to work is used to pay the banks, or it's used to pay the taxes that's used to pay the banks, or it's used to pay the high prices for the telephones or for the monopolies that the monopolists used to pay the banks for the bank loans that they took out to buy these companies. So they're being bled by a centrally planned economy that's planned really by the oligarchs. So the idea was to get rid of the old bureaucracy that you had under communism, and now you have a financial bureaucracy, often run by exactly the same people who were running the economy before 1991. So they've just changed their clothes.
So if you wanted to fix things or change the path, what would be some of the simple things that you would do?
You go back and you start over again. The most important thing is to have an American progressive-style tax system where you base the tax on property, not on labor. You want to bring down housing prices, bring down rent prices to what people can afford. You do that by having the tax on the rental value of property, so that this income will not be available to be paid for the bank for a bank loan, to be capitalized into a higher and higher priced house. The property prices went up because of a financial bubble. The financial bubble was created by bank loans. The bank loans were based on the failure of the government to collect the rental value, the prosperity, in the form of tax. I'd do what the American cities and states did for many years, base the tax on the property tax, get rid of the income tax on labor, even get rid you will have probably a progressive taxation. All of the Western countries have progressive taxation. Latvia doesn't. You need a progressive tax system for starters. You need a government price control agency and basically an oversight agency to prevent monopolies, to keep prices in line, essentially to prevent financial fraud, to prevent exploitation by the financial sector. Just like in America, the new proposal for a Consumer Financial Protection Act is designed to prevent usury, to prevent high interest loans, to prevent penalties that banks add on. In America, banks make more money off penalties than they make off interest charges. The new law is going to prevent that. So that Latvia should do what other countries having the same problem should do. It should regulate and prevent the banks from exploiting them the way that it does. So next to the tax reform, you need a financial oversight reform. You need consumer protection. I understand that Latvia has many laws on the books already to do this, but they've put deregulators into the regulatory agencies who don't do anything. You make sure that the government will actually put regulators and apply the law, because if you don't apply the law, you end up with lawlessness. And that's pretty much how Latvia's gone into, a kind of lawless society in terms of economic practices.
So you are also essentially arguing for a much greater role for the state.
The state is a regulator, not the state as a planner. You do want the private sector to exert its choice, but in order to give people choice, you need the state to come in and prevent the financial sector and the real estate sector from interfering with this choice. Right now, Latvians don't have a choice because the financial sector is taking all of the surplus, leaving them only with break-even income, or even less than break-even income, so that many Latvians have to emigrate. I want to give them that choice again. They need the state to protect them against large enterprises, against multinationals, and above all, to protect them against what we call predatory finance.
What do you see as the potential for that?
Latvia has a great potential. You have a wonderful geographic situation in between Russia and the West. The people are very highly educated. It's a wonderful country. You have wonderful food. You can feed yourself. That's very important. You can be self-sufficient in food. You can be a lot more self-sufficient in energy, I understand. There's a lot of things that Latvians can produce if they don't have to carry this heavy tax burden along them. You want to free them from this needless taxes. That's the point. The taxes they pay are needless. It doesn't have to be this way. And I don't think many Latvians realize that they have a choice and it doesn't have to be this way.
What about the voice that's coming from Europe? I mean, for instance, Almunia in the letter that where Latvia needed the money for the bailout last year, Almunia said that there is no alternative to the program.
Yes, what Almunia says is that Latvians are very confused. Latvians imagined when they were joining Europe that they were joining a social democracy that was going to raise their living standards to European standards. They believed that Europe would make them like Europe. That's not what Europe wanted. Mr. Almunia said, we're not here to help you. We're here to take everything that we can from you. We're here to empty you out. We're here to load you down with debt as a market for the Swedish banks, just as we've made Hungary a market for the Austrian banks. We're here to sell you our surpluses. We don't want you to produce agricultural products. We want you to buy our products. When you joined Europe, didn't you understand? You're joining as a colony. You're a colony. You're not one of us.
Finally, there's...
That's what he said in his letter. That's my paraphrase, but that's the meaning of his letter, that you are not being treated like a normal European. They're treating you as a victim, and they're the predator.
What would you say, for instance, to a person who's very happy that the Lattelecom, the telecommunications company, had a 10-year monopoly because that was one of the largest investments to be made in all of Eastern Europe. and the telephone service was drastically improved because of the investment.
Well, if I'm talking to somebody who's happy about this, he's probably president of Telecom. And I'd say, I guess you're making a lot of money very easily off very little investment of your own by making other people pay high prices.
Are you saying foreign investment is a bad thing?
Not necessarily at all, but it has to follow rules that are regulated so that the investor gets a fair return. A fair return is a normal return on capital, but does not make super profits, does not make excess profits, and is not allowed to charge whatever they want with predatory pricing. Certainly in the United States, ever since 1890, we've had the antitrust regulation and anti-monopoly acts to prevent foreign investment from being predatory. The United States never would have permitted something like this, but it has a lot of foreign investment. So the foreign investment needs to operate in a regulated environment that protects the domestic economy.
I think one of the answers that some people would have to that would be that there's no way to attract foreign investment without offering them deals. For instance, in the case of La Telecom.
But that's simply not true. Their deal. Many companies invest in American phone companies. Many companies invest in the United States that has rules like this. So that's simply not the case. You don't need to let the company rape you in order to have a nice relationship with it.